Morning.
Good morning. We'd like to welcome everyone to the April 11th Landmarks Commission meeting. In compliance with notification requirements of Ohio's open meeting law in section 101.021 of the Codified Ordinance of Cleveland, Ohio, 1976, notice of this meeting has been publicly posted. All boards and commissions under the purview of the City Planning Department conducts its meetings according to Robert's Rules of Order. Actions during this meeting will be taken by roll call vote. Recusal from any case due to a conflict of interest should be stated for the record prior to the beginning of the presentation. In order to ensure that everyone participating in the meeting has the opportunity to be heard, virtual attendants will use the raised hand feature before asking a question or making a comment. The raised hand feature can be found in the participants panel on the desktop and mobile versions and activated by clicking the hand icon. Please wait till the chair or facilitator to recognize you and be sure to select unmute and announce yourself before you speak. When finished speaking, please lower your hand by clicking the raised hand icon again and muting your microphone. Call-in users can unmute by using *6. All meeting activities are being recorded via the WebEx platform. These proceedings are also being live streamed via YouTube. All requests to speak on a particular matter submitted through the proper channels have been considered. Proper channels for comments are sending an email to landmarks@clevelandohio.gov email address with a comment or a letter, calling or leaving a message at 216-664-2532, sending a letter or dropping off comments at City Hall located at 601 Lakeside Avenue, Suite 519. Communications with members of this body must follow proper channels for consideration. Any comments received by the stated deadline are collected by the Landmark staff and disseminated to the commission members prior to any scheduled meeting.
Right, just to go over the meeting rules and procedures. The chair will call each agenda item and then each applicant will be invited to proceed through their presentation. Each presentation should be completed prior to questions and comments from the commission in order to facilitate a smooth presentation. Once the presentation is concluded, the chair will ask Landmark staff to summarize design review committee recommendations and any public comment received. The deadline for public comment is noon on the Tuesday prior to any regularly scheduled Cleveland Landmarks Commission meeting. Any received comments are distributed to commission members prior to the meeting, and staff will also identify any members of the public present and scheduled to speak. Public comment is allowed at the discretion of the chair, and any individual providing public comment is permitted 2 minutes to speak to the agenda item in which they have an interest. The chair will then request a recommendation from staff. The commission will then begin deliberations and project review. Any commission member except the chair may make a motion at any point after an agenda item has been called.
Right, we'd like to call the April 11th, 2024 Landmarks Commission to order. Mr. Musson, please call roll.
Ms. Anderson?
Here.
Mr. Dreyer?
Here.
Mr. Dulick?
Here.
Councilmember Gray? Director Wong? Mr. Lozier?
Here.
Mr. Sandberry? Mr. Strickland? Mr. Trasick?
Here.
Dr. Williams?
Here.
And Ms. Trapp?
Here.
Madam Chair, we have quorum. Just like to note that in addition, we have Kevin Roberts and Patricia McGinty Aston, our representatives from the Law Department, as well as Carl Brunges, Jessica Beam, and myself from Landmark staff.
Excellent. Well, then we'll begin our meeting with reports.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for having me, for letting me present to you first thing in the morning. I appreciate that. And thank you to the Landmark staff for inviting me to come talk to you about some of the recent policy changes we've made as the Planning Commission and as the City of Cleveland. So I have some slides that I prepared for this meeting that I presented to the Planning Commission. These slides are pretty much the exact same slides, so I'll go through them and I'm happy to take any questions as time permits. So here's a brief overview of what I'll be presenting to you today. So presenting an update on what we're calling our Transportation Demand Management Program. So I'll give an overview of the program standards and the fact sheets that we put together, what we mean by TDM tiers and the TDM strategy menu, the process that applicants can expect in terms of applying and registering their TDM plans, and then how we plan on enforcing this. So we have a slew of new definitions in the zoning code and available as part of the TDM program. Here are some of the key definitions to understand. TDM is just an acronym for Transportation Demand Management. That includes design features, incentives, and tools implemented by a transit-oriented development project that are designed to reduce vehicle miles traveled and/or single occupancy vehicle trips. A TOD project is again referenced in that first definition, and that's any land use development, including new construction, which changes or expands the use or uses on a parcel of land entirely or partially within the TOD zone. Finally, the TOD zone is an area that's within a quarter-mile radius of a high-frequency transit station, so that is a bus stop or a train stop with 15-minute headway service or better, and that is depicted in the TDM program standards. This is roughly estimated to be a 5-minute walk from that station or stop. We have a map of what that looks like. It's a little small to read on this screen, but this is also available on our website and through the City Planning Commission's GIS as a layer that can be toggled on or off for both applicants and the public to understand where this area is mapped. But essentially, it's again that quarter-mile radius from the priority transit corridors as designed and operated by our regional transit authority, the Greater Cleveland RTA. So an overview of what this is. What does this mean? Essentially, we're replacing minimum off-street parking requirements in the zoning code with this TDM program. So all projects within that TOD zone are no longer required to build a minimum amount of off-street parking. Projects are still allowed to build parking. They're allowed to build parking as much as they need or feel like is appropriate for their project. But they're not required to build a minimum number for the zoning code. So new construction projects in a tier 1 or above must develop and submit a registered TDM plan. And TDM for changes of use or expansion of uses, which are common projects the Landmarks Commission sees taken at tier 2. I have a slide explaining what those tiers are in just a second. TDM plans must include menu items that total enough points as determined by the tier menu, and they must include a detailed site plan narrative and supporting documentation if it's required by the strategies they're selecting. And then TDM plans are reviewed during what we understand to be the normal entitlement process. So why are we doing this? We presented a few times to both planning and landmarks as to some of the background thought and policy as to this change broadly. In general, these are some of the highlights. Parking requirements are broadly considered now and understood to be a form of exclusionary zoning. They forbid or prohibit certain uses based on their ability to provide or dedicate a certain amount of private property to off-street parking. In Cleveland, these are especially challenging requirements given our existing socioeconomic and racial disparities in mobility. 1 in 4 households in the city of Cleveland simply lack access to a personal vehicle. 1 in 5 Clevelanders are under the age where they can legally drive. And surface parking generally pushes land uses further apart, which makes it harder for us to rely on walking, biking, and public transit as a daily means of transportation. Parking requirements generally, they make projects more expensive. Surface spaces cost anywhere between $5,000 and $10,000 per space to build, and structured parking can cost upwards of $30,000 a space to construct. And generally, we're asking property owners to provide off-street parking in historic districts that where properties don't have the space to do so, and so they often end up appealing these requirements, which can add weeks onto project timelines, both small and large. So what TDM will do is we'll make it easier for these smaller infill projects to obtain permits. Many variances we see through Board of Zoning appeals are businesses that wish to open in existing storefronts that have been vacant sufficiently for a sufficient amount of time to require them to come current with our zoning code, which again has required parking minimums. So this will make it easier for those projects to obtain permits for storefronts to be filled. This will allow housing of a wider variety of types to be built, housing that may be marketed to people who don't have cars or don't rely on cars or are located in areas where transit service is sufficient, that there might be parking provided, but below what our statutory minimums used to be. And so this will also make it easier to renovate those often historic or landmark projects that were built before parking minimums existed. This will support our current and planned investments into multimodal and transit infrastructure. We're not only building significant infrastructure, for example, like the Superior or the Lorraine Midways, but we're also working on a citywide mobility plan. We've adopted a Vision Zero action plan to increase safety and reduce traffic deaths and serious injuries on our roadways. And this also supports investments that RTA is making. They're investing well over $100 million into new rail cars for their rapid transit system. And that is an investment we would like to support by allowing development along those stations without burdensome zoning regulations. And this will ultimately facilitate more walkable, transit-oriented communities. So this provides flexibility, again, for property owners to decide, well, I'm located in this area, I'm served by these resources, maybe I don't need as much for any parking as part of my project. To give you a sense of context, this is an analysis we've done and revised over the past several years to understand, where is there sufficient housing density to support the level of transit service that we operate. Cleveland, we believe, punches above its weight in terms of the quality and frequency of transit service we provide to areas of the city that are fairly low in terms of population density and have depopulated over the last roughly half a century to 60 years. And so this gives you an understanding of where there is or is not sufficient population density to support the level of transit service being provided, both on bus rapid transit routes, high frequency bus routes, and rail stations. I'll note that one of the densest areas of the city in terms of proximity of housing units to transit service is Shaker Square, which is long regarded and highly respected as a district of historic structures and housing quality. So going back to what I mentioned earlier as the TDM tiers, this is essentially the applicability of TDM to projects based on either dwelling units, the size of retail square footage, or the number of on-site employees. You can see here that new construction applies, TDM applies to new construction starting at tier 1, whereas it applies to expansions of uses or changes of uses starting in tier 2. The way this works is that any attribute of a project applies it to that tier. And so what I mean by that is a project that has maybe 10 dwelling units, but 10,000 square feet of retail, hypothetically speaking, it would be in a tier 2 if it's a new construction project. That's also true if it's a change of use or expansion use. So it's any attribute that moves it over that threshold that determines the tier it's in. And that subsequently determines the number of points that are required for that project to select from the TDM menu. How do you earn points? You do so by selecting strategies from the TDM menu. We've broken this out into 10 categories. I'll go back just for a second to explain what those are briefly. Those categories cover areas such as transit, providing information and access to that transit network. Active transportation, which includes mainly bicycle amenities, but there's also an opportunity there to bundle those options for bonus points, which I can explain in just a second. There's a category for parking, so in terms of locating parking or providing flexibility in terms of how employees or tenants may purchase or pay for parking. There's car share strategies, there's commute and ride share strategies for employees, employers. There's housing strategies related to the affordability of a project. There are family strategies like providing daycare or proximity to daycare. There's delivery services and finally building features. So how a building is designed or oriented towards these transportation amenities. The menu is rather long. We don't have the whole thing shown in this presentation today, but it's basically broken out in this way. There's a code for each strategy identifying simply what it is and what category it's in. There's the more descriptive definition of that strategy, for example, providing subsidized transit passes at various levels of subsidy. There's a more detailed description of what that strategy is and then the point value. And it's broken out into categories, like I mentioned, transit, active, etc. This is a flowchart detailing the design process. Again, it's a little difficult to read when it's in a PowerPoint slide, but we'd be more than happy to share this with the whole commission if you'd like to review this. This is a document we primarily developed to share with applicants and prospective applicants so they can understand exactly where this fits in the development process. Essentially, what we're doing is augmenting our entitlement review process and directing applicants to be aware of TDM and submit the required information as part of their building permit application. That way, when it's forwarded from Building and Housing to the Planning Commission or the Landmarks Commission, staff at either of those offices can understand, okay, this is subject to TDM. I can forward it to the neighborhood planner for them to review in more detail what that plan contains. Is it complete? Is it accurate in terms of understanding current and or existing and perhaps future planned infrastructure investments in that area? That plan is then reviewed and preliminarily approved by staff, and the applicant then can proceed through things like a design review with the local landmarks committee and then the commission, or perhaps they need zoning variances or some type of other entitlement. That process proceeds normally, and TDM is viewed as sort of a preliminary approval prior to those steps taking place. As part of that process, sometimes projects are changed or modified based on design review feedback or adjustments related to the zoning code. Those things are allowed to take place, and then if any changes to the TDM plan result from that, that is how the way that is checked is through the final submission of construction documents. And so similarly to how design review, there's a check to make sure that the construction plans match what design review is approved. That would take place similarly with TDM. And then if that's included in the construction permit set and is approved, that project would then be allowed to be permitted, it would be constructed, and then during or immediately after construction, we have a registration requirement. So plans are registered with the city so we can understand how they will be basically affected in perpetuity. And the reason why that's important is because we broadly have two classes of strategies. There are physical improvements to either the project, the property, or the right-of-way around it, or there are what we're calling programmatic strategies. So those are things like providing transit passes at various levels of subsidy. That is required to happen for the life of the project. And so by requiring registration of the plans, we can make sure that developers are continuing to do what they agreed to. We're providing a website as well. This is currently in the final stages of development, but all of this information in terms of the TDM tiers, the application materials, instructions on how to submit a plan, links to Acela and other online tools for applicants to submit their applications, that'll all be available on our website. And this is a screenshot of what that looks like. So again, I mentioned enforcement just briefly earlier. I'll detail that more now. And so essentially we're building an application process that will take place entirely through Acela. And so similarly to how applicants apply for building permits, they will be directed to apply for a TDM registration. The way the ordinance has been written and adopted is that registration is issued by licenses and assessments. And so there's a $150 fee that must be paid. That same plan that we reviewed during the entitlement process is submitted as part of that application, along with their selection of strategies, again, that are present in the plan. They pay that fee, which is $150. We review the plan, compare it to what was approved during the entitlement process, confirm that everything is done. There's photos of the bike racks that they installed, or they're showing receipt for the transit passes that they agreed to buy for their tenants, for example, or their employees. And then we approve the registration. That registration is valid annually for the first 3 years. And then assuming every year they're complying with what they agreed to as part of their TDM plan, it can be then renewed for a period of every 3 years. And right now, registrations expire on the same day every year. They expire October 31st. And so plans, registrations and plans would have to be resubmitted on or before that date. Again, the same plan that's provided during the permit review process is what we expect and can be used for the registration. And that's all I have for you. I'd be happy to answer questions you may have.
Any questions or comments? No? I think it's a very understandable plan, and I appreciate you coming to present it to us.
Absolutely. I'll make sure you have a copy of the presentation and links to our supporting documentation.
Excellent, thank you.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Matt.
We have one additional report, Landmarks Commission policy adoption.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Something we've been looking forward to for a long time. Landmark staff, we've wanted to create more definitive guidelines for standards within to match other cities and to hopefully keep things consistent across how we adjudicate things here. These solar panel guidelines that we've developed should give more clarity to homeowners and contractors and set the parameters for that consistency through the design review process. If applicants can meet these guidelines up front, it can expedite the permitting process. That's always a good thing. In developing the solar panel guidelines, we consulted the National Park Service's bulletin on solar panel installation, which gives direction on how to meet the Secretary of the Interior standards while helping to create opportunities for lowering both environmental impact and energy dependence. We reviewed previous installations from our case files. We reviewed installations of solar panels that stood out, both positive and negative, from various travels through the city and throughout the state. And as best we try, we know that there's gonna be angles where these are visible. We're trying to mitigate those facts and minimize the visual impact of these systems. So we considered a number of things when going through this, like the materials, the colors, be as non-obtrusive as possible, darker single frames and panels. Have an example here. This church here is actually on the National Register of Historic Places. And they put on a solar panel which blends in with the roof color. The one thing we would probably want through our guidelines is to push it back a little bit more from the edge. But as you can see straight on, you can't really see them. And that's where you want to have that. Let's go. With new construction, potentially using the solar panels as an architectural device. In a lot of cases here, we're going to have a lot of tree cover, but there may be opportunities for this. This is actually an example from Pasadena, California. Smaller panels on the lower one in southern Ohio, which are out of the way, you can't see it. It's going to depend on what you want to meet your energy demands with and how to do that. So there are multiple ways to figure this out. What we would prefer to see is panels on a secondary building out of the way, but you can see here in this case, they used the panels that have multiple colors and it stands out. Had this been a single color, then it wouldn't stand out as much. We would also put recommendations for testing these older houses to be able to handle the weight load of the new systems and putting that in there and giving that guidance to folks as well. We do have other examples in the panel policy that we sent out to you as well. I think that we don't want them on primary facades. If it's going to be on a house that doesn't have a cross gable, that it's set back 25% of the total area. This way you're minimizing, we're not saying no, but there are going to be cases where people can't have solar panel. It's unfortunate, but we can't give it to everybody. But if we are consistent with these guidelines, I think more people will be able to get them and we will be able to be better for it and meet our goals with the standards. And if there's any questions, I'll take them now. Thank you.
Any questions or comments?
Okay. One more slide here.
I guess before you get into questions or comments, we were looking for the commission to formally adopt the policy. So if we could do a motion second vote on it as opposed to just a typical report.
Okay. Excellent. All right, so we'll start with questions. Mr. Sandberg?
Yeah, a lot of this talks about gabled roofs, and we have a lot of hip roofs in Cleveland. How do we address those? I think there should be maybe a point for hip roofs. We also talked about panels being missing across the whole display. And I think sometimes roofs will have a chimney or a vent or something like that. And I don't know that I fully agree with missing teeth on that panel, on the display. Maybe there are cases where one could be missing if there's a vent.
Right.
Yeah, and again, case by case basis.
Sure.
And
Okay.
this sets a basic standard, say, hey, look, we have a problem here, we can't do it this way. And then that's when we would pull it through the review process and say, okay, there is an exception to what you are doing. We want you to have it. Is there any other way you can do it? If not, okay, we've looked at all other options.
They're basically looking for, I guess, a set of standards that allows us to kind of administratively approve things or move things along. If there are those more challenging questions, like, oh, this one's got, 3 chimneys, so do we place them like this? Do we place them like this? Then, we bring it through design review, at least maybe up to you guys, depending on the circumstances. But it just sort of gives us a way to approve the easy ones, I guess.
It's like any other project. If something comes through to us and meets the standards or meets guidelines,
Right.
We'll take care of it. And that's why we're looking at 500 plus permits and you're getting 120 cases. So there's that tiered.
Other questions and comments?
Madam Chair. So for flat roofs, that has to do with setbacks from the visibility of the street or the primary facade in terms of putting solar arrays and racks on flat roofs, or is that gonna always be a special?
Oh, like you mean like where it's not lying flat, but it's actually raised up?
Yeah, where you have a flat roof building, like a commercial building, even
Right.
one story where there's an opportunity or
Mhm.
desire for, where you literally create the sloped surface with a frame. Do the guidelines address those?
We have in here for flat roofs to be lower than parapet, so if there is a parapet on there to be lower than that, which is also National Park Service standard. Again, there's gonna be exceptions to every rule, so it's one of those things, we'll have to address it if we find that exception. And we're trying to hit as much as possible, but we know things slip.
Thank you.
Great question. Other questions or comments? Would someone like to make a motion?
Make a motion to accept the guidelines or solar panels. Solar panel roofs or so just.
Solar panels.
I will second.
All right, so we have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion? No? All right, Mr. Messi, please call roll.
All right, Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Dryer,
Yes.
Mr. Dilla,
Yes.
Mr. Lozier,
Yes.
Mr. Sambry,
Yes.
Mr. Trossing,
Yes.
Dr. Sorry, Bob. Mr. Strickland,
Yes.
Dr. Williams,
Yes.
and Ms. Trott.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes unanimously.
Excellent. Well, thank you for the hard work in getting that formalized so that now we have a policy. We will then move on to our certificates of appropriateness. We'll begin with our first applicant located at 1852 Fulton Road, new addition and garage. I'd like to welcome the applicant. Please unmute your mic, announce yourself, and tell us about your project.
Good morning. My name is Antonia Marinucci. I'm the architect on this project. I think we went to schematic review last fall. And the project originally was a small second floor addition at the rear of the property and a first floor attached one-car garage. And what ended up happening was that the county mapping that we were building that site plan off of ended up being like very inaccurate, and we didn't have enough space to do the attached one-car garage as planned. So now the proposal is for final approval has adjusted to show a detached one-car garage. And the small second floor addition at the rear is still present. So this is history of the property. You'll note when you see the existing site plan today, it's a little bit chopped up. There's a main front house that the addition is occurring on, and then there's a rear cottage. And the owner currently owns both properties, lives in one, rents the other. Next slide. So this is the existing site plan. You can see how the rear cottage was sort of carved out of the site plan. And you can also see where the discrepancy in that county mapping was because I didn't update the existing plan correctly. So this proposed site plan is showing that second floor rear addition and the location of the single car detached garage. Also at the rear on the front house's parcel and off the same driveway system that already exists. Next slide. This is photos of the front home from Fulton. Majority of the work is not visible from the front. And then you can see in that middle photo the cottage at the rear is the detached garage proposed here will be right next to that property, but still fairly out of view. Next slide. Some photos of that south facade. Once you enter the property, the small one-story massing at the rear is where the second floor addition will occur. Next slide. And more photos of the rear of the property. Again, that area where there's the solid door in the middle photo is the existing like mudroom, powder room, laundry room, and the second floor addition will go above that space. Next slide. Plans for the proposed work on that addition, for anyone that's curious. Next slide. And then here are the elevations illustrating that addition. Again, it hasn't changed from our schematic review. One change that the owner did request as well was to replace the windows in that rear bedroom area. So we are proposing aluminum clad wood windows in the 2/2 style to fit the existing openings for just that bedroom portion at the rear. And then the addition is kind of like a story and a half over that existing mudroom massing. And then you'll note that the proposed garage elevation is also shown. That's facing the driveway. One concession that my client is asking for is that the garage be vinyl. So we've specified certainteed smooth vinyl in Pacific blue, which is a fairly close match to the blue cladding on the existing home. Next slide. And that's our finished schedule, illustrating the addition itself. It will have cedar lap siding to match the existing construction. All of the edging and chamfer details that are in those corner boards is going to be replicated. And then the windows themselves are aluminum clad windows. We're reusing one historic fixed window in the new work. And then I didn't specify a brand yet, but they'll be almond to match the rest of the home. And the basis of design will be Pella, Marvin, or Anderson for those, for brands for those. I think that's it, right? Yep.
All right.
Oh, yeah, and the local committee had, if you, Dan, if you want to go back to like the rear photos that show that rear downspout, suggested that we work through a more elegant solution for that downspout that's kind of crossing the facade at that rear, which we are planning to do for work through with the contractor on site.
Excellent. Thank you for the presentation. We'll then move on to design review committee feedback comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This, I guess, the committee, having seen this as a concept, made it for a rather smooth presentation and discussion. The only real discussion, as Nia mentioned, was about the downspout locations on the back of the building. So the committee made a motion to recommend approval as presented with the consideration that to camouflage the downspout system.
All right, thank you. And Landmark's staff recommendations.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this project was reviewed conceptually. This is the concept that was presented. As you can see, it's changed a bit. There were a lot of discussion around that concept plan in regard to zoning. As Mr. Yuchi mentioned, there were some issues there with the garage location in the front half of the lot, as well as within 10 feet of residential dwelling. And so we are happy to see these visions and changes. It still fits within what our standards are for additions to buildings and new construction on lots. And so we are in agreement with the design review committee that that downspout be reworked a little bit, but otherwise in support of the project.
All right. Thank you for that recommendation. We'll then open up the floor to the commission for questions and comments. Any questions or comments? I guess I'll give my feedback. It's a very, discreet addition, and your consistency of materials I appreciate. So I'm in support of the project. And I do not have any issues granting the exception for vinyl on the garage since it is new construction.
I was just gonna basically say the exact same thing that you did, so.
Excellent. I think, Mr. Doolittle?
Madam Chair, to the applicant, thank you for a good presentation, but definitely in support of the project. And along with my fellow commissioners. There are a couple of questions. Just wanted to know the reasoning behind the smallness of the windows. I guess looking at the small square ones, both at the little dormer
Yeah.
and at the back is one of the reasons for that. And then the opportunity for the roof slope on the garage to actually be a little steeper and more in harmony with the house. Just they're not required. There's questions about what was considered or what's driving it. Mostly curiosity.
Sure. The garage itself, the slope is just driven by the use of like a prefabricated standard garage truss. So just an attempt to value engineer and keep the cost in check on that guy. I don't disagree that I would prefer to match. And I can discuss it with my client if that's something that's important to the committee. The size of the windows on the existing or on the addition, that rear one, if you look at that proposed side, wait, I'm sorry, that's a typo on my end. If you look at that rear elevation, that's the existing window to be reused. We wanted to reuse it in a similar orientation to how it was. It was that little transom on top. The bedroom space is vaulted, so it acts as like a little transom in the existing space. I'm also very, I would say, particular in my modifications of remaining deferential to the existing home and the existing massing. So the choice to make it like feel more like a story and a half versus expressing a taller volume was more an aesthetic choice from my end. And then the little dormer window, it's a little bit scaled up from the back window, but it mimics that size. Or I'm sorry, that proportion.
Okay. Thank you.
Excellent. Any further questions or comments? Or would someone like to make a motion?
I can make a motion. I'll make a motion to approve as presented.
Excellent. So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Anderson. So we have a second. Any further discussion?
Just the consideration of reworking the gutter as recommended by the Design Review Committee.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr.
The
Secretary.
downspout, I mean, downspout.
Thank you, Mr. Strickland. Yes, with the, do you agree?
Yep, yes, I agree.
Yes, okay. Thank you, Mr. Strickland. So we have that as part of the approval. Any further discussion? All right, then, Mr. Mawson, please call roll.
All right, so we have motion to approve as presented with the consideration to rework the downspouts
Right.
as recommended by the Design Review Committees. Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Dryer,
Yes.
Mr. Dulick,
Yes.
Councilmember Gray stepped out, Mr. Lozier,
Yes.
Mr. Sandberg,
Yes.
Mr. Strickland,
Yes.
Mr. Trosick,
Yes.
Dr. Williams,
Yes.
and Ms. Trott.
Yes,
Madam Chair, the motion passes unanimously.
excellent.
you.
Congratulations. Good luck with your project. We'll then move on to our next applicant located at 4021 Whitman Avenue renovations.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for allowing us to present our project. My name is Josue Negrete. This is my wife, Flor Sedano, and we are the owners of this property. So our project consists of three things: replacing the siding, replacing the existing vinyl windows, and repairing the front porch. So if you could please move to slide 3 so you could get a picture of the whole house, and then I'll start over from the side. Oh, actually, that's good right there. So that's the front view of the house. Okay, so if you could go back to the first slide, please. Okay, so with sliding, the house has 2 layers of siding. It has insul brick, which is like a shingle material, and then it has lap wood siding. And there's areas of the house where there was water damage, and when we try to remove the insul brick siding, there's excessive nailing. So by even trying to repair or restore the underlying, it cracks easily, the wood, and also with the nail holes and everything. So we decided that what we want to do is just replace all siding with James Hardy. And it's going to have the same reveal that the underlying lap siding has, which is 5 inches. And it's going to be smooth, similar to what the original would have looked like. So that's the siding part that we want to do. If we move to the next slide. And these are the colors of what we want to give an example of the color theme we want to use using the historical palette, the Sherwin-Williams. Of course, there's going to be other spindles that we are going to try to replicate, and those are going to have the same kind of color theme. If you go to the next slide, please. Yes, so this is the front, and if you can go to the next slide. You're going to see that there's excessive water damage and termite damage at some of the posts, and we actually had to add support because the front porch was given in. And so the goal here is to replicate the posts. So we want to get custom-made posts that look very similar or the same. And there's 6 of those posts. And if you move to the next slide, please. And the front porch with the fascia, that looks in pretty good shape. So we're going to restore all the decorative wood. And then the spindle's the same thing. Any spindle that is water damaged, we will try to replicate. So it's going to have the same height, try the same pattern, same design. And then again, all the decorative wood, we will try to restore that as much as possible. Next slide, please. So the house has an existing vinyl window. There's 26 double hung, or there's 23 double hung, and 3 are picture windows. And we're going to replace those windows with the Marvin Elevate model, which is fiberglass. I know the design committee, they recommended that one of the picture windows has stained glass. And their recommendation is to keep it. And we have no problem doing that. We just have to make sure that any of the framing is, there's no rot or anything like that. But as much as we can save that window, we will. So that's not a problem. If you can move to the next slide, please. It's just another picture of the existing window. Next slide. Yeah, so this gives you the specs of the Marvin Elevate window. Next slide. And this is just the specs of the James Hardy plank. Again, we're going to do 5-inch reveal, similar to what the underlying lap wood siding has, and it's going to be smooth. Next slide. And this is a picture of the front, the back, the side. As you can see at the back, there was excessive water damage, especially in the bottom by the gutter system. And we had to take some of the insult brick out, and that's when we realized that it was going to be almost impossible saving the wooden lap siding. Next slide, please. And this is a picture of the neighborhood. We're on Whitman Avenue. Next slide. Get more pictures of our neighborhood and the houses, our neighbors. Next slide. Yep. And that's it. Happy to answer any questions.
Excellent. Thank you for the presentation. We'll begin with Design Review Advisory Committee recommendations.
Right. Thank you, Madam Chair. The committee saw this at their meeting last week on April 4th. They're generally supportive of the project, the materials, colors, and approach. They were happy to see the insult brick go and being replaced with a high quality material that matches the original siding as closely as possible while utilizing new products that should stand the test of time. So ultimately it was as approved as presented with consideration to preserve the second floor decorative window sash and the decorative porch details. They were also happy to see the proposed use of fiberglass composite windows in a darker color, being a significant improvement over the white vinyl that's currently there. And yeah, the primary discussion was really just around the porch details.
All right, excellent. And Landmark staff recommendations.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Landmark staff is in agreement with the Design Review Advisory Committee. The replacements proposed are in kind or are with a higher quality material with the smooth party board to replicate the existing look of the house. Go to the next slide. We do have a picture of the house from 20 years ago or so, which looks pretty much the same as it does now. So we're looking forward to seeing that lap siding return to the house and the decorative porch details retained, restored, or replicated.
Excellent, thank you. We'll then open up the floor to the commission for questions and comments. I guess I'll go first. You know, I appreciate the owner's commitment to restoring the house back to its original glory through the more modern materials, but addressing their restoration needs, and also being open to maintaining the second floor sash, because obviously that's a key detail of the house. And then finally, the porch details. The porch is beautiful, and I look forward to seeing it restored with the details moving forward. So overall, I'm in support of this project. Mr. Strickland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with your comments completely, but I want to reiterate just how much support I have for this project and commend the owner for this level of commitment to restore this beautiful home. Can't wait to see it done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Strickland. Ms. Anderson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also agree this is a wonderful project. It'll really be nice to see the insult break off of that house, and I really commend the owners for their considered approach to this renovation and maintaining that porch, the columns. This is wonderful. I guess my one concern is often when you remove the substitute sidings from these houses, especially on the front elevations, you'll find some interesting siding treatments, like fish scales or little notches. I was just wondering if you did find any interesting siding underneath, especially on the front, if there's any consideration to being able to maintain that or reproduce that in, it's called AZAC or something.
Yeah.
I think there's less penetrations on the front than there were on the back, so it probably would be in a little better shape. But yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. So our goal is, so when we start this project, we will carefully, as much as we can, remove the insult brick from the front, because to your point, there are some very unique sometimes, right, patterns of wood used, and we want to keep that, and especially under the porch because there is coverage there. So we will do that. If there's the one thing that I didn't mention this is that insulation was blown in, so you will see holes going around the house. Right. And we don't know if that was just on the bottom or it was done every 5 feet or so. Right. So that's another thing to consider, but especially in the front, like whatever we can do to save, we will. Like that's our goal, is to because we want to make the house and we want to make it unique to the neighborhood. So if there's anything that we can save that's different from any other house, we will. So that's for sure our goal.
That's wonderful to hear. I really commend you for this project. This is the kind of thing that I love to see. So this is great. Really appreciate this.
Thank you.
Ms. Anderson. Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Other questions or comments? Mr. Loden?
Thank you, Madam Chair. You may have mentioned this during the presentation, and I apologize if I missed it, but the porch rails at the sort of the lower porch rails, those don't appear to be original or historic. Can you remind me what your plan is for those?
Yeah, so with the contractor, we've discussed to custom make spindles. So like the top spindles to match those, obviously the height is going to be different, but we do want to put spindles there that are going to match the top.
Okay, great, thank you. And then just one comment, following, my colleague about the front elevation as you remove the existing material. I'm wondering if that center window was actually historic, or if that was added at some point in its history. So if there's evidence of a different window being there prior, that I'm wondering if, when you take it off, what you're gonna find. So maybe just consideration of, similarly to any detail that you might find underneath that from the sort of the wood siding perspective. But if there's evidence of a different window there, that may warrant some additional investigation, maybe.
Yeah,
as to-
Yep, for sure. Yeah, we're excited to just start peeling off the front because I know hopefully we find something really cool. So we're also excited
Yeah.
what we find. So definitely we'll try to keep and restore as much as we can.
So I can imagine that's a really exciting, all sorts of opportunity right there.
Jealous.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lozier. Other questions or comments, or would someone like to put forward a motion? Hearing fairly consistent support.
I move that we approve it presented.
Will you consider adding the three considerations that have been mentioned?
Yes.
Which were the maintaining the second floor window sash, leaded glass or stained glass, I think it's leaded, window, maintaining or replicating the porch details, and then consideration to replicate any front elevation siding details that might be discovered. So we have a motion with considerations. Or do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. We have a second. Any further discussion? All right, Mr. Musson, please call roll.
All right, Madam Chair just so nicely summarized all the motions and conditions. I won't do it again unless anyone has any confusion. So, Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Dryer?
Yes.
Mr. Dulick?
Yes.
Councilmember Gray?
Will say yes, even though I missed most of it. I won't say yes because everyone else is pleased with the project.
All right, Mr. Lozier?
Yes.
Mr. Sambry?
Yes.
Mr. Strickland?
Yes.
Mr. Trasick?
Yes.
Dr. Williams?
Yes.
And Ms. Trout?
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes unanimously.
Excellent. Well, congratulations and good luck with your project.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll then move on to our next applicant located at 3906 Fulton Court, renovations. I'd like to welcome the applicant. Feel free to unmute your mic and announce yourself. There you go.
Hi there. My name's Daisy Goddard. I am the owner of the property. I believe my architect Gary Fisher is also here right now. I can see him in the participant panel, so I'll just wait a second in case he is here right now.
So, Mr. Fisher, feel free to unmute your mic.
Yes, I am here.
There you go. Welcome.
Thank you.
Please proceed with telling us about the project.
So the house has been greatly altered over the years. There was a large rear addition put on at one point. This was built as probably a little worker's cottage at some point in its original past. There are two small, I'm going to call them crawl space basements, so it was always a double. One is at the rear of the house, one is at the back, and they are on the left and right side, respectively. Over the years, the house has been pretty well altered inside and out. There's a lot of damage to the house after Daisy and her husband bought the house. Unfortunately, squatters got in there, set the house on fire, compromised the roof structure, compromised the floor structure in some cases on the second floor. The multiple additions over the years compromised a lot of the structure. Some of the buildup of the land around the house has caused some rot and water damage. There's some additional termite damage on the first floor structure and around the perimeter walls and the plate at the foundation line. So they took on the project, trying to renovate, knowing some of these things. And unfortunately, as they got started, the fire happened. And now we're, faced with having to redo the roof, redo a lot of the interior walls, redo the second floor structure. So their project budget, just increased rapidly. And a lot of the damage conditions were, I don't want to say hidden, but overlooked by a home inspector that, worked on the project before we got involved. So at this point, we're trying to get them, back into the house, get things fixed up, try and salvage what we can of the structure without having to, knock the house down on, which Daisy can tell you that was one of the things that we did talk about because it's a lot of repair for the house. That's really, kind of the overall look at the project. So window locations have changed over the years. If you get into the inside of the house, there are openings that were cut and covered multiple times. There's cobbled together framing. So the drawing that you have shows what we are proposing to do with the house. There is a small porch at the front right now that was of newer construction. But because it's a south-facing home, I think it could really use that. And I think, Daisy, if I'm not correct, these are the old drawings. These are not our new drawings.
Correct. So I did provide, I believe it was Jessica Beam with the updated drawings that you provided me.
There we go.
Ah, there we are.
So the upper left-hand elevation shows the current configuration of the house with the front porch. It has some very kitschy wrought iron. They're not wrought iron. They're really like aluminum or pot metal posts holding up that little front porch. It's a salt box design, not original, added on over the years and changed. But I understand that the board wanted to maintain the salt box design, so we did change the roof line back to the salt box. We did raise it up in order to allow a reasonable second floor because the ceilings were very low on the second floor. The elevation in the lower left shows the house without the little front porch roof. And it does become very plain at that point. And then the elevation at the right is the rear of the house, current configuration with the addition of 2 small windows that will be in a bathroom. And then the 2 side elevations showing installation of some additional windows. And we are right on the property line on both sides. So it's a pretty tight site overall. I know that the board was looking at some other finishes and windows, and Daisy, you might want to jump in on the selections that you made on those.
Yeah, absolutely. So we discussed the use of vinyl windows throughout the property, but I believe the design review board requested fiberglass windows in the front of the house, which I'm completely happy to go with. The siding that already exists will be it will be repaired and patched. We're gonna match the vinyl. It's currently vinyl, so we will continue to use vinyl there. In terms of color palette, it's currently kind of like an off-white color, so I think we're gonna keep that. And then windows, most likely we will also be keeping them white for now.
And your roofing?
Oh, roofing, sorry. So we'll be using a charcoal gray shingle.
And what type of roofing is on it right now?
I believe it's currently shingle.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So in-kind replacement?
Yeah.
Yes.
Digital roof, yeah.
Perfect, thank you. All right, anything else you'd like to tell us about the project?
Honestly, I'm all good on my side. Just one thing that I did want to point out that isn't, it doesn't really relate to this, but it wasn't squatters that caused the fire. I just wanted to put that in there, because I am also in litigation, so.
Excellent, well, thank you for the presentation. We'll then move on to Design Review Advisory Committee recommendations.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This project was reviewed by the Historic Ohio City Design Review Advisory Committee on April 4th. Yes, the committee discussed the vinyl placed, as Ms. Goddard mentioned. They did have concerns about the gable form from the salt to the gable front, and a lot of discussion about the existing roof and how it's not salvageable in its current form, and so would have to be rebuilt just in general based on the damage. They ultimately were in support of the project and recommended approval with the materials, with the condition that the gable form not be altered, as you saw in the revised drawings where that gable form was not altered, and understanding that the rear roof line may be raised just due to the needs of the interiors.
Excellent, thank you. And Landmarks staff recommendation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At first, that site of a salt box form was kind of intriguing because you don't see that in Northeast Ohio at all. But as mentioned, it is not typical here, and it is a much later addition, and the history that was given is quite accurate. It was dates to at least 1890s, probably earlier. It's been modified heavier. The salt box form is found mostly in the 1700s into the early 1800s. These are from Southern Ohio. So it is a form in Ohio, just not typical to Ohio City. So therefore, and I think kept a little misunderstanding. I don't think we said to keep the salt box form. We were just saying that keeping the gable, changing the gable orientation would not be appropriate, but expanding out from the back could be. Since this building has been altered many times over its history, that front open porch was originally added in 1925 per permit records, currently not the current one that's there, but it did not originally have a porch either. So staff is okay with there being a porch or not being a porch. Maybe it's something they want to add later on as a cost-saving manner at this point, and could be given approval for later addition. That's not a big deal. The windows mentioned, yes, there's 4 on the front going to the fiberglass is great. White vinyl on the sides and the rear are fine. That's a standard that we do consistently. Yeah, that's an exception that we consider. But the salt box form is not necessary, I think, in this point, but adding the roof line extending back perpendicular to the existing would be a more appropriate treatment. But we support the project overall and hope they can get this done quickly.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll then open up the floor to the commission for questions and comments. Any questions and comments? All right, well, I guess I'll start. Oh, Ms. Anderson, go ahead.
Yes, I have a question about the windows on the second floor in the front. So I just want a clarification. Obviously, those are the original windows. Are you going to be putting just like a standard double hung and something that's going to be a little, maybe a little narrower, but a little longer?
Yes.
Correct, yes.
That was my question so far.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Other questions and comments?
I just have one.
Yes.
I just have a comment. I just want to say preserving this structure this long ago was just amazing. Carr said the house was actually built in 1772?
No. I was giving examples of this type of construction that doesn't exist here. So no, we didn't have anybody in the early
Okay, so
1792. It's in the 1880s, I would think, as it originally was built, but it's been expanded in the 1890s, 1920s, and it's been changed over. It's an old building, just this form is not typical. So for us to consider changing this form based upon all the alterations that have come before would be okay. Just maintaining the basic overall form of this building.
And however, still, it's just amazing that this house can be preserved and renovated from those many years up to this point, instead of being demolished as some houses can be sustained. So I just wanted to make that comment that this is fantastic, just to know that this can still happen to preserve these homes.
Thank you, Councilman Briggs.
Well,
Great addition. Other questions? Yes, Mr. Dooley?
Madam Chair, thank you. Yeah, I just want to commend the owner architect for saving this house because it has gone through a lot, and I'm just really glad to see this not only preserved, I think it's unique in a lot of ways, even in its relation to the street. Everything about it is not necessarily consistent with what we see, but I think that's part of the charm, and I think that's part of the magic, and I think those trees are incredible. The trees will live.
So I really want to save as much of the trees as possible. I believe the tree at the front of the property is causing some foundation issues, so we're kind of trying to see whether or not we'll have to cut it down and grind down the stump, or if we can just remove some of the limbs, because I believe there's 2 or 3 massive trees on the property, and unfortunately the limbs extend over my property and 2 properties either side. So just for insurance purposes, we'll have to at least remove some of the limbs. But yeah.
That's great, but just again, not a request or anything, fully in support of the project, because I think that there's something very charming about that that I think can be part of the preservation of it. One question I had is I'm in support of your desire to keep the porch, even though that's not a requirement. You could go either way. I think keeping it's nice. I think in the spirit of the fact that this has been altered, and I think that the alterations are really part of the history and the story of this. So I would request consideration for something different or something maybe more substantial for the support of that porch, those columns. I think it's a very eclectic thing that reflects all the efforts over the years to keep this house as a home. So just consider from a design perspective whether you would, I wouldn't suggest what you would replace it with, whether it's columns or what have you, but something that I think would be a reflection of what you might do today. I don't know, but that's the one thing that does feel a little odd. So again, I wouldn't make it a requirement, but I would request consideration for studying other approaches to supporting the porch column, other columns, different columns.
Thank you. And thank you for your comments. I really appreciate that. Myself and my architect, Gary Fisher, we have a kind of professional relationship outside of this project as well. And we, I think I can probably speak for the both of us, just how much we really enjoy the historical architecture of Ohio in general. And Gary, if you don't mind me mentioning, Mr. Fisher is also the president of the Design Review Board here in Lorain, which is one of the reasons why we chose him to be our architect for this project, because he has a lot of dedication for historic renovation.
And I think Daisy and I would both agree that those columns have to go.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think something fairly simple would be appropriate for, for the house and the nature of the house and probably its past. I don't think we would get into anything very ornate with it. It just would be too much for, just this little worker's cottage.
Exactly. Even if you go back, if I may, to the photographs of the Junaid Hutton house or whatever it was, I think that was really kind of a cool example of how a porch was added to the salt box. I don't know if that was actually that one, but one of those photographs had something that had simple round, no orders or anything like that,
Right.
simple round columns. The one there on the right, I mean, that's kind of what you got.
Exactly.
So to me, something of that nature would be great. I think that could be handled with staff review. Approve this as presented. And again, it's great to see this saved.
Well, Mr. Julick, that sounded like a motion to me. Could you like?
It
to
is,
do
I
it for
would
me?
like to make them, in fact, you hadn't asked, I would have offered. I would like to make a motion to approve as presented with consideration for studying and presenting to staff alternative porch support columns.
Excellent. So we have a motion with one consideration. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Any further discussion? We have a motion. We have a second. Any further discussion? Ms. Wojcik?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have just another, I guess, clarification question. So it looks like on the side elevation that the salt box form has been flipped. So the rear portion is higher than the front portion. And I'm just wondering, I guess, what was the consideration there? And would it be possible to flip it back to the similar orientation that it is today?
Certainly. Yeah, at this point, we're putting the roof back on the entire house, so it's not a problem.
Okay. Ms. Anderson, would you agree with adding that consideration to reorient the roof structure so that it is more in line with the current? I'm sorry, Mr. Dulick.
Yes.
Ms.
Thank you.
Anderson. as
Mr.
a-
Lozier, thank you for noticing that. I hadn't
Yeah.
picked that up.
So you agree with adding Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
You also? Thank you. So great catch, Mr. Lozier. Thank you.
And just for clarification, is that a condition or is, okay?
I would make that a condition.
Not a problem.
All right. Any further discussion? All right. Mr. Musson, please call roll.
All right, so we have a motion to approve with the condition that the roof be reoriented to match the current configuration and a consideration for studying and presenting to staff the porch support details. Is that, all right, Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Dryer,
Yeah.
Mr. Dulick,
Yes.
Councilmember Gray.
Yes.
Still not here. Mr. Lozier,
Yes.
Mr. Sambry,
Yes.
Mr. Strickland,
Yes.
Mr. Trassick,
Yes.
Dr. Williams,
Yes.
and Ms. Trout.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes unanimously.
Excellent. Well, thank you for
Very
your commitment to this structure and good luck with your project.
Thanks
Thank you
very
so much. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll
Bye-bye.
then move on. Goodbye. We'll move on to our next applicant located 4104 Whitman Avenue renovations.
Down is on
Tech savvy at
Yeah.
all, so. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for your time today and let me present. I like to come in person because it's better for me to explain the project and things like that. My presentation is not as formal as other people's. I do apologize for that as well. So this property is located at 4104 Whitman Avenue. The house was built in 1870, so it's got some age on it. The property has been vacant as far as I can tell for at least the past 10 years. It has gone through multiple modifications over the years. It has a mishmash of windows that are between wood, aluminum, vinyl. So it's a complete as I said, mishmash on that regard. The roof, I don't know if it's the original, but I'm assuming it's the original slate roof, which does unfortunately have massive holes in it, and is discolored and is missing portions of it as well. And then with regards to the porch railings, it's actually not as decorative as some of the other projects we've seen today. I can go to the side. The front porch has just standard columns with the crisscross wood on the front. And then if we go to the side, we can actually, I apologize. You can see at the top of the porch, there are some spindles. And then there is, I don't know how to zoom, I don't know if I can zoom in on this, but there is some decorative trim on the wood columns on the side, but nothing too ornate in that regard. The property is a legal 4-family, so it is a little bit different from a standard single family presentation. The inside was gutted by the previous owner. It is now down to the studs, and we will be spending a significant amount of funds on the interior, bringing it back to life. Now, a couple of problems with this house, being 154 years old and not being taken care of. There has been extensive water damage. There's been extensive damage to the wood. If you look on the back of the house, there were some doors that were closed up and things like that. You can see I don't know if it was another basement door or lower window. Long story short, repairing the wood as is would be extremely difficult to get a homogeneous look. When I was considering purchasing this property, I did go around the neighborhood, and I did realize that every single, you have to. I understand your job is to balance the history of a house along with modern standards. And a couple of things we're running into is one, this is the only house that I guess has a slate roof currently, as every other property on the block has a standard asphalt shingle, not decorative, not architectural. So I understand the concern here. Being a corner property, I also understand that there's a lot more exposure than a standard property. And at the same time, given the size of the house, the number of windows is extensive. So, replacing, for example, I got a quote for a slate roof that was almost $60,000 as opposed to a shingle roof, which is $15,000. I'm not a resident of the house. I own the house. This will be a flip, most likely. Depending on budget, I may have to convert it to a rental property for myself. But the goal would be to restore it as best as possible and bring it back to as glorified as it can be. My goal is on the porch to keep the spindles, and the wood, the ornate wood on the side porch. Ideally with the railings, I would prefer to put in, I'm going to get to it shortly. Something of that type, but I am not opposed if the committee would prefer to keep the wood spindles as is and refresh them. So that I'm totally okay on that regard. You'll notice at the front, in terms of other historical architectural things to consider, if you look at the front of the house, there is some, at the top, you'll see some white inlay up in the corner there. I'm happy to keep that as well and paint it or wrap it in aluminum, to match whatever else I do with the window trim. And then you'll also see there's fish scale. It's damaged in some areas, as you can see at the top. Very difficult to repair something that old, but I am open to using fish scale siding to replicate the original charm of the property. In full disclosure, the committee prior to this did not approve this project. I did have a negative interaction with a neighbor who trespassed on my property. The first hour we were at the property moving in materials, that interaction was not a pleasant one. And I believe he did have some impact on the committee because it was the quickest no I've ever seen any kind of vote possible. So you will see that reflected in the Landmark Commission report. It was not a pleasant experience, coming in here to Ohio City, as I'm just trying to do the best I can to remodel and make a profit, as is, the name of my game. I've had multiple quotes done. The amount of carpentry work it would take to I could paint this, I could scrape it and paint it, and it will look like putting lipstick on a pig. That's just the reality of it. The property is missing boards throughout. To have to replace it with the wood damage and things like that, it's it's just not gonna look great. It will look preserved, but you know, by example, the house we saw earlier has mostly good wood. This property does not have that. So I cannot afford to put hardy backer on it, you know, given the size of the house, we're talking significant cost. But I am willing or able to do potentially a wood grain look siding. I did go around the neighborhood. 4302 John Street was approved in the last 3 years. It had wood siding, and they went over it with the cheapest vinyl siding you could find. Dan, I don't know if you have that picture that I emailed you earlier.
I don't have it in the presentation.
A section of the siding was missing when I drove by, so I was able to see the wood siding exposed. And then by comparison, the property right next door, 4020 Whitman, was actually in much worse shape than this one several years ago, and was granted permits to use vinyl siding. It is not hardy board; it is vinyl siding, and they do have vinyl windows on the sides of the houses. But that, you know, so ideally, we're trying to make. My goal would be to make the house look identical. Although I would like to use light green siding, but I'm not opposed to any siding color. Honestly, that's not a particular concern because I think they all look great. I only went with green because I think 3 houses in a row were all that light blue. So I was going to change it up a little bit, but I'm open to gray, blue, light green, just not red. I don't like red, but I'm not married to anything like that. It's just that there's water down, you know, there's cracks in the wood, in the current wood siding that's allowing water infiltration. And it's extremely cost prohibitive to, you know, as much as I would love to keep it as close to the 1870 form, a slate roof is just not feasible in today's world. And again, in keeping the consistency of the neighborhood, as I said, every other house on the block has asphalt shingles, so this would not be an outlier. You know, so that's kind of where we're at on this project. There was a garage on the project several years ago that had been built. The prior owner, I think, owned this for 7 years. And he actually had plans to make this a 5,500 square foot single family residential with a crosswalk attached, carriage house and 3-car garage. So he knocked down the existing garage, which we may or may not put back at some point. But right now, even though property records show there was a garage, that garage has been removed. There are a couple of trees on the sidewalk and things like that, which we plan, you know, obviously we're not going to remove that. The main thing is this has been an eyesore for at least the last 10 to 12 years. It's a high profile corner location. A lot of houses, we even had one earlier on the block, are being remodeled as well. And this is probably the last remaining eyesore in the neighborhood. And as a business person, the goal would be to restore it as well as possible and flip it. If I can't do that in a cost budget way, then I would convert it to 4 rental apartments. Because I could get away with, you know, sacrificing on the interior finishes to a lower level, laminate wood versus vinyl plank and things of that nature. But, you know, I don't want to do that. I want to make this as nice as the house next to it. So I thank everybody for your time today and your consideration.
Excellent. Thank you for the presentation and for coming in person. We appreciate it.
I did fly here from a couple of thousand miles away. So.
Well, thank you for coming. We appreciate you coming in
I
person.
thank you for your time.
We'll start with Design Review Committee, Advisory Committee recommendations.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome to sit.
Yeah, you can sit up here too.
Yeah, you can sit
Wherever
wherever
you close to everybody.
Yeah, so the Historic Ohio City Design Review Committee did see this meeting at their April 4th meeting last week, and as the applicant alluded to, it was denied as presented, but I did want to provide some context, just because we don't see many just straight denied as presented projects coming to you guys. So the applicant made his presentation, but when it came time for the committee discussion, there was just not very much of it. While the first committee made her comments, the applicant interrupted and the discussion kind of went off the rails from there. The committee was not really able to have its typical discussion of a project or the opportunity to discuss potential compromises. While the project was denied as presented, I feel that if the committee had been able to discuss it further, that some compromise would have arisen. You know, without the chance to really discuss it, the committee sort of went with a strict interpretation and adherence to the Secretary of the Interior standards, oftentimes while acknowledging the strict and conservative approach. to the standards. The committee, like this commission, is willing to consider mitigating circumstances in their opinion. But in the absence of the opportunity to have a real discussion, no circumstances were discussed, no alternatives were discussed, no compromises were discussed, so the committee passed a motion to deny as presented unanimously.
Thank you for that feedback. Then we'll move on to Landmarks Commission recommendations, or Landmarks staff recommendation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We've discussed this at length, but a little bit of context for the house. This is a really nice 1964 image of the house, where you can see the front porch intact, as well as the side porch. The spindles have since been removed. It's been through a lot over the years. This is a picture from the early 2000s, so about 20 years ago. This is it from a few weeks ago, and you can see nothing's been done in about 20 years. And so we're love to see the investment as either a rental or a sold home in this neighborhood. The home does have some very unique details on it that are worth recognizing. There is kind of hard to see, but there is a little bit of like novelty or decorative siding on the side gable. It goes flat, and then there's a little like sawtooth pattern that's in a diagonal on the siding, which is very interesting and definitely should be researched and kind of looked at. There's also, as mentioned, there's details on the side porch that show a little bit more detail that may have been on the front porch as well. And the roof, while it is slate in very poor condition, which is understandable, slate has a lifetime of about 100 or so years. There are some interesting details of little like,
Finial.
Yeah. That's kind of sticking out. It's missing on the side gable of the house. But you can kind of see it on some of the dormers as well as on the front. And so there's these little intricate details, as well as parts of the home that have been restored. There is, as mentioned, a bunch of different types of windows on the house. And so we look forward to seeing that discussion and seeing where we can land on something that works best for the home, for the neighborhood, and also for the applicant.
All right, thank you. All right, then we'll open up the floor to the commission for questions and comments. Who'd like to start us off? Ms. Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I'll start with the roof. And I agree that roof is shot. Slate is not economically feasible. My comment here, though, is given that we have the historic roof color, rather than go with a black shingle, I think we should get something that's sort of slate oriented,
Color-wise.
Color-wise, not the slate, just the color.
And I apologize, I'm not well versed in slate, even though I've been doing this a long time. Would that be a charcoal? What color would that be?
No, it wouldn't be a charcoal.
Dan, do you know what color that would
Something with
typically
a
be?
little brownish, warmish hue.
Yeah.
And maybe your roofer can have some samples and, you can kind of take a look.
I'm not opposed. Like I said, the color scheme does not matter as much to me as long as preserving the historical, at least color or the spirit of it.
And I think the green is great, I guess depends on the hue, but.
It would be, what I had envisioned was this one right here.
Okay.
Dan, am I in?
You gotta go. It's the other way, yeah. And just regarding the roofing color, yes, staff sees a number of different roofing color options. There are different blends.
And you can share that with
There, yes, yeah, there are some that have a variety of hues.
Wait, did I skip it? I'm sorry.
No, it's a little slow. There
So
you
that's
go.
kind of ignore the black, but that's kind of the green.
Yeah, that's
That I had
totally
in
fine.
mind. I think the black, even the black fish scales on the front would be a nice contrast to preserve that, but I'm not opposed to other color fish scales.
Yeah, I
gray,
would not
white.
go with the black.
That's
The gable of the house has a lot of interesting.
correct.
And there's that band of looks like a raised panel.
The white
that's
squares.
a unique feature. Yeah, that's the kind of thing I would not want to see removed. And I realize it's not a fun project. It's expensive. It's hard to get to. but it's.
Yeah, so I have no problem keeping, you're talking about these white squares at the top.
Yes,
I have no problem keeping that and then we're, keeping the part up top.
Okay,
Um,
all right.
So I like the historical part of it. It's
Okay.
just that the prior committee doesn't understand there's a reasonableness to what can be done in
Right.
terms of cost and preserving at the same time,
Yeah,
not making it look like I'm piecing together different parts for the sake of doing it, and then the house just has no, and you're driving by going, wait a minute, it looks,
Yeah.
he did this nice way, but he did it. I'd rather one seamless look while retaining as much,
right.
on that older picture, we saw the wood trim. Love to keep that on the porch as well, so we're not gonna get rid of that, because I think that's beautiful woodwork.
All right.
But I'm not opposed to roof color to satisfy the committee
Okay.
and keeping, some of the structural, uniqueness of the property.
Appreciate that. I appreciate, keeping those like little porch spindles and.
So, just to clarify, would the committee want me to replace not the spindles, but the crisscross railings? I can either keep those or I can put the new vinyl, the ones I showed, because the floorboards on that deck are also they're warped and, so this is what I had in mind for the railings. But at the same time, I'm happy to do wood as well. Again, not married to anything. That just had a cleaner look, but I'm not opposed to using wood spindles and replacing those X's. I think the X's, as you saw, would not be original.
X out the X.
Yeah, I like that, XDXs. So I'm not opposed to either putting in wood with traditional wood spindles or replacing it with the cleaner vinyl look. Again, I'm totally open-minded in that regard.
I think the wood would be our preference, obviously, with such a great example, photograph also, it would be nice to have when the original material come back. It can be in a simpler form and you can work with staff on the detailing of that porch if you're open to it.
Absolutely.
Because it would really make this property really shine. So sorry, Ms. Anderson, I didn't mean to cut you off. Other
No,
questions
no,
or comments?
This is fine. No,
That was it?
that was it for now.
Excellent, all right. Other questions and comments from the commission? Mr. Sandberg?
As far as the slate roof, I think everybody's in agreement. It's typically 100, 150 years, and we've got 100 years.
154.
And I've been to a conference in DC with the National Park Service. They are okay with a architectural shingle replacing slate roof. It's not something that goes against the standards, so I don't think we should shingle. As Ms. Anderson pointed out, I think the front gable is something that really needs to be focused on. I don't think I would agree with this rail kit, but I wouldn't. Great. The colors are really the vinyl around the entire house, I think maybe more of an issue. I think there may be some kind of compromise where the side and the rear might be okay, or depends on this conversation. But I think because you are at a corner lot, the front and the south side,
West side.
might need to be something a little more appropriate.
Well, and again, I typically deal in vinyl siding, so what would be more appropriate, or what would be some ideas? Because the rear is in very bad shape, so that's part of the
Right,
problem.
and I think there may be a compromise when we do vinyl on the rear, depending on what it's too. I think what are the stuff we spec?
Austin is a product, a cementitious product. The Hardy board is, a name brand of that comes in a similar profile, but is more aligned with the original wood siding, and can blend then also with the vinyl as you transition to the less, the non-street facing facades, so that would be your rear, and then the side between your neighbor and your house.
So you're saying vinyl on the front and the rear, and cementitious on the street facing? I apologize.
The front and the side that face streets.
Mhm.
And then you can do vinyl on the rear and the side that faces street.
In your experience, has that, because again, I've never really done mixed sidings, how does that typically end up looking when you mix like that? Because it's going to be a pretty, again, I'm trying to visualize it. I imagine it might look a little.
If you can, you'll have to work with profile.
Yeah, and I was just gonna, this was before my time here, but the house right next door, the blue one that was, I think showed up in some of the pictures, was that, I believe that was supposed to be hardy on the front with vinyl on the sides and rear.
It's actually all vinyl.
I haven't been up to.
If that's the case,
If that's
we
it,
need to have
yes.
investigated.
Yes.
Because that was not, it was approved.
Yeah.
And John, and 4302 John, just by comparison, they went with the most big, they had the exact same wood siding, and it is a corner facing property with actually exposures on 3 sides, I believe, to the street. And they have just a tan vinyl siding. I do apologize, I emailed it to Dan, but the problem with hardy board is it gets very expensive very quickly on a house this size. And at that point, again, speaking honestly and financially, I might have to look into scraping the sides and restoring the natural wood as much as possible before going that route.
Which we'd be open to also. Obviously we want to try to maintain the integrity of the house, but understand there's circumstances in every house that we need to look at. And if the rear is in poor condition and the siding is not able to be restored, that is a secondary elevation along with the one between your neighbor and yourselves. So I think we could compromise and make that exception for vinyl in those areas, and scraping the wood and restoring the wood. In some cases, you may have to replace some boards, but it will probably be far cheaper than replacing all of it.
So the committee would be, just to be clear, we're either okay with scraping or cementitious on the 2 streets facing sides.
Correct. So Mr. Sandberg?
Yeah,
continue.
I think that was the bulk.
And the windows, any?
Yeah, the windows are the big thing as well.
And you're proposing vinyl?
I'm okay to do, obviously I know you guys like to do fiberglass. I know this property's a little different because it's a corner. Problem being corner is there's a lot of windows and none of them are the original. There's some wood, there's metal, there's vinyl. So it's hard to do in kind because it's not all one or the other. So I am proposing fiberglass on the front and vinyl. Right now it's all double hung on the property. That's what's been there. And I believe it was even 20 years ago. I believe those same photos from the historical photo were double hung. I am interested in keeping those 3. Those are actually an interior stairwell up to the 2nd floor. Those are original windows. Those are actually not broken. Those are in good shape. So I would like to keep those because those are, obviously architectural and historical nature. The other ones have been changed or replaced or broken throughout the years. So I'd like to keep it looking identical to the way it is now and the way it was 20 years ago. I understand that part of this neighborhood has been absorbed into the historical district over the years, so there's a lot of inconsistency because, again, on the block, a lot of the houses have double hung. I know you like the grids, but some of these windows are too small to really make the grids work there.
I think we only like the grids when they exist and
Right, if
there's
evidence.
demonstration and looking at the historic pictures,
You have it the front gable.
Yeah, oh yeah,
just in the gable.
the rest look like 1/1.
Does that look like the original window?
Yeah, it looks like a casement.
With the windows on the front, the 1st floor is a cottage thatch window, it's oversized cottage thatch window. 2nd floor appear to be just typical double hung windows. The 3rd floor had decorative windows that were in a grid pattern of possibly like 3x7. That was just all grid. Those have been missing for more than 3 years for typical street view.
It's a slider. It was a slider window when I purchased the property. It broke. I did put in a temporary slider just to prevent water penetration, but there was no grids on any of those windows.
So I think we again would probably recommend the fiberglass on the front and the side that faces the side street, vinyl.
Work with that.
Great feedback. Okay, anything else?
Yep, that's it.
All right. Other questions and comments from the commission?
Yes, Madam Chair, I just have a question for the young man.
Thank you for saying young. I don't feel that anymore.
just because. So,
Just be nice, okay.
okay.
Just be nice.
So my question is, I'm just enthused that you selected to renovate this house and that has aged over time. So I'm just curious about that.
I'm sorry,
why did you
Councilwoman,
choose
what's-
to select to renovate this house with this aging process, and why, and what is your desire to do with it? I think you alluded to it a little bit earlier. I just want to know, why did you select to do this? And if this is something that you always do other than flipping them.
Great question. So typically, most of my experience has been 2 to 4 families on the west side of Cleveland. Definitely not architectural, structural, things of that nature. I'm interesting, or at least I consider myself interesting in that a lot of guys only do one thing. I like building up rental properties. I like passive income, but at the same time, I like designing. I like designing kitchens. I like designing bathrooms, flooring, things of that nature. It's kind of my hobby. So this one was very interesting because in this market with flips, the housing market has slowed down over the last couple of years. This one was very intriguing to consider because as a 4-family, which is very rare, it allows it. My thought process is that somebody who can't afford a house on their own, because for example, let's say a single family house in this area of Ohio City goes for, let's say, $450,000 median with the average price. That's a lot of money for a lot of people. Now this one is going to sell for more than $400,000, but it'll be offset by the fact that the person buying it or the family buying it can live in one unit because the main floor is going to be one primary, nicely remodeled 3-bed, 2-bath unit, and then they will be able to offset their mortgage, and the banks will consider the rental income that they can generate. So if they can generate, let's just say $4,500 a month, and it should be more than that, but somewhere between $4,500 and $6,000, somebody could potentially live in this house rent free because the rental properties are paying their mortgage, and it also helps for their qualifications. So when they apply for financing, the bank goes, well, you can only afford $2,500 a month, and this house would be $4,000, but they're getting $4,500 a month rent. So the bank goes, absolutely. So for me as a business person, this is a property that could overcome the stagnant resale market because it allows people to have affordable housing, and also people that want to live in Ohio City but can't afford to buy a house. This will add 3 more nicely renovated apartments as well. So it kind of meets all the boxes, and at the same time, professionally, as you do things, you want to kind of push yourself and expand yourself. So when you've done rental properties or single family flips, when you take on a slightly bigger project, as any career, you want to kind of move on and expand your horizons and push yourself. And I embrace the challenges such as coming to the committees and things like that. I love the process.
I see that.
So for me, it was, let's try this out. I got it at a good price. The numbers worked. The benefit to the neighborhood and a home buyer worked. The community worked. So, I'm looking forward to it being a solid project. Like I said, I just ran into a couple of hiccups up front. But hopefully we put those to bed now. And, now that, it seems that this committee is open to compromise, which I'm happy to, everything has been reasonable within, I can do within budget. I look forward to, finishing it and showing the neighborhood what it can be done.
Well, good. I don't have the expertise as anyone else per se, but that fits into what the comments and the suggestions that you need to do to finish the renovation of this house correctly, and you take in the information as a whole to move forward with that. So thank you for that.
Thank you
for your
so
time.
much. Other questions and comments? I agree with all the recommendations and appreciate your approach to compromising with the commission so that we can, obviously uphold the standards that we have, but trying to compromise so that you can balance the budget because this is a very large structure. So I'm in support of the project with the recommendations that have been made that I've noted. I think that Dan's gonna. Other questions and comments from the commission?
I may make one comment. When it comes to the vinyl versus the scraping and repainting, replacing strategic boards, I think that would be, the preferred recommendation for the entire structure. So if, just for consistency's sake as well, so you're not mixing and matching materials. So if there's an opportunity to scrape and repaint, preserve all of the historic details on all four sides, I think that would be ideal. But I think we would be willing to compromise on as my colleague has mentioned, on the rear facade and the facade that's facing your neighbor.
Ideally, I'd like you to have the freedom to, kind of go with what some of the other committee members have had. It is very possible that upon looking at the budget further and doing more inspection on potential water damage, I'm more concerned about the water damage and rotting, which is an issue. I mean, there are some houses in Ohio City that the siding is in stellar condition. The wood siding is beautiful. I mean, pristine, to the point where I have to walk up to the house and see if it is siding or not. This house, you can see the missing boards in the corner there, all of the missing boards at the bottom. If it turns out to be just a couple of boards, that becomes more feasible. My bigger concern is the back where they patched it with different kinds of wood and things of that nature. And no matter how well I scrape, it's not gonna look perfect. But in all reality, the two options that are probably gonna end up happening are either one, I would either just go all in and scrape and paint everything, or go with the cementitious and the vinyl. I'm a big fan of consistency, but at the same time, I don't think wood with half vinyl would look solid. So I feel like it's either something that you either go all in on the wood, which I'm open to doing, but at the same time, can't commit to that being feasible based on, the things I've already discussed. So I like scraping. I think it's in line with the neighborhood, but I would prefer to have the flexibility because I can't guarantee that it's going to look appropriate.
Yeah, and I think that just the follow-up there would be working with staff once you do find and investigate kind of what the, to what extent you'd have to be doing, replacing and scraping and all of that. And if there was a significant enough change to the plan, then, outside of working with staff, then it would come back to us to approve any other opportunities.
The only thing that might come up, or that might come before you guys again, because I'm not sure, because Dan and his team have been great at responding. I just had a call with my builder this morning, or the guy doing my plans. The only thing that might come before this board at some point is we are looking to finish the attic space as livable space, and as a means of egress, putting a rear stairwell on the property, which there is another. I actually just purchased. I don't anticipate being before the committee for that property, but I did just purchase another property at 1834 West 44th, which we are repainting, the roof's fine, things like that. So that one is probably gonna be handled administratively. But 2 houses down, I don't know the number, that property actually has a very large, and I would be looking to do a smaller structure, but they must have done the same thing. And they have a rear stairwell that goes from the backyard directly up to the 3rd unit. My planner is finishing plans now, so I don't have any visuals on that. So that might
come back.
Correct, exactly.
So once you have that, once we get through this, and then
This
once
is
you
the
have
big
that,
part. Yeah, the
we'd
stairwell
love
is.
to, come back to staff and
That's
talk
not a
about it
problem.
with staff, and then we can decide if it needs to come back to us or not once it's designed.
But I do appreciate Dan. He's been very responsive, getting me roof types and things like that. So I do appreciate that. And I do want to work with the committee because I think this is a good project that can benefit everybody. So.
All right, any further questions or comments? I'm sorry? Oh, Mr. Strickland, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to make the applicant aware that in consideration of replacing the slate roof, that Certainty makes a product called Carriage House that has like a sculptured tab on it. It's considered a premium shingle, but I think it's in line with their landmark line of product, and just make him aware that that's an alternative to the slate that is very effective in kind of replicating a slate look on a house.
Thank you. I think Dan actually included that in the email that he sent me for review. So we are reviewing a bunch of different types, but I do believe that one is on our radar. Thanks to Dan.
All right. Very good. I just want to make sure you're aware of that alternative.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Strickland. Any further questions and comments?
I'll just note for the record, this is Director Wong. I came in halfway, so I'll abstain.
Okay, thank you, Director.
It sounds like we came to reasonable conclusions.
I think we're on a good path.
Great.
Any other questions or comments? All right, would someone like to put forward a motion?
Make a motion to approve this project, with the recommendation that the asphalt shingles match a more appropriate color, and possibly a size or shape.
Architecturally, you said, is it?
That the requirement that the railings are wood. The requirement that the front and street side facing portions of the house are fiberglass windows with the option of fiberglass or vinyl on the side facing the neighbor and the rear. A requirement that the front and street side facing portion of the house is either scraped and painted with the original wood or replaced with a in-kind material, the fiber cement product, with an option for the rear and side to be vinyl. You see fit to work with staff once you start discovering more. The requirement that the gable be retained as much as possible.
In return for any stair additions.
In return for any stair additions.
Good luck repeating all that.
Yeah.
Here you go.
I do have one question for clarification purposes, again, because I haven't worked with hardy siding.
Hold on, I apologize, point of order, we have a motion on the table.
Oh,
I
sorry.
apologize.
Yeah, so we have a motion, well, you can come back in a second. We have a motion, do we have a second?
This is Alan, I'll second.
Thank you, so we have a motion, we have a second. Now we can return to further discussion or clarification.
Just for clarification purposes, because I haven't worked with hardy siding, is it a matter of the texture or is it that it has the wood grain in it or the flat grain in it? That makes it attract, I'm just, because I know vinyl siding comes with wood grain and flat, so is it, I'm just trying to, because I haven't worked with it before, so I just wanna.
Yeah, typically we prefer the flat, the wood grain, I guess while they sell that as an upgrade or whatever, it looks like wood that's been.
So you want the flat
sandblasted,
finish.
So
Okay.
flat is ideal.
Just want to clarify.
And then would blend better also as if you have to change materials.
Thank you for the clarification.
Sure. All right, any further discussion?
Yes.
Sam?
I'd like to add that the, what is the finial on the front gable be retained.
Is
Mr.
that,
Sandberg?
is that a metal piece?
Yeah.
What do they typically?
Probably. I apologize, I don't even know what a finial is. Is that the piece at the top?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the little wing, like fin that comes up there.
Not a problem, not a problem.
Okay, Mr. Sandberg, do you agree with that? And I'm sorry, who was second?
Mr. Dryer.
Mr. Dryer, do you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Any further discussion? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I to expand upon Ms. Anderson's comment about the finial at the front, if there are other finials on other portions of the roof, I would say all existing finials. And then also to add to Mr. Sandberry's comment about the front gable and retaining all of the decorative elements within that, I would also add that to all of all of the others that are on all the gables that are on the sides of the house as well.
Can I also, to retain the original windows that would step up on the side.
Yes.
Can we just simplify that? I
I
think
would
for
agree
his,
with what Carl just said.
yeah. Obviously, we want to maintain the decorative elements as much as we can. So Mr. Sandberry, are we okay with that revision to the language to, okay, Mr. Dryer, are you agreed to the revision to the language?
Yes.
All right, excellent. Any further discussion? All right, I think we're there. Mr. Musson, please follow up.
All right, I'm going to try and summarize this just because there's a lot of it. We want to make sure everyone's, clear and on the same page. So we have a motion to approve These may be in a slightly different order than what they were said. So motion to approve with the condition that the railings be wood, that the front and side facing windows be fiberglass with an option to use vinyl on the rear and neighbor side of the house, that the front and side siding be scraped and painted or replaced with fiber cement, with the option for the rear and side, the side being the neighbor side, to be allowed to be vinyl, that all finials and decorative gable elements, essentially that all decorative architectural elements be identified and motion or step 2, identify and retain all decorative elements on the house, that staff would work with him to ensure that they were all identified and we knew what the plan was. And then a recommendation that the asphalt roof match a more appropriate slate color than the black. And that he return with the rear stair once that is designed.
Got everything I noted.
Is that okay? All right, ready? Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Dulick?
Yes.
Councilmember Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Lozier?
Yes.
Mr. Sandberg?
Yes.
Mr. Trassick?
Yes.
Strickland?
Yes.
Dr. Williams?
Yes.
And Ms. Trot?
Yes.
All right, Madam Chair, the motion passes unanimously.
Excellent.
Everybody, thank you very much. You guys have a great week.
You too. Have a great week. And thank you for coming in person.
Thank you. Wish the weather was a little nicer.
Yeah.
Every time I come here, it goes from 70 to 35 and
Yeah,
rainy.
just stay another day. By Saturday, we'll be back up to 70.
Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so that concludes our certificates of appropriateness. We'll now move on to our Cleveland Landmark nominations. We have one in front of us today. Mr. Brunges, would you like to introduce this?
Good morning. Still, hey, it's morning still. Awesome. I'd like to we'll introduce them, our members of the Greenbrook Baptist Church in a few moments. She's hiding. This building that we are talking about, Second Greenbrook Baptist Church, the former St. Margaret of Hungary Catholic Church on East 116th Street. It is on the east side of 116th in Ward 4, just south of Buckhead Road. See the property outlined. Our history is that the members of St. Elizabeth Church met to form a Ladies and Men's Sick Benefit Lodge for the purpose of forming a new church and school in the Upper Buckeye neighborhood. This was a nationality parish, which they would be doing it in Hungarian, speaking that way. So there was 2 others. St. Elizabeth was one, St. Emmerich was one, and now this is one for a little bit further east. Because it was still Upper Buckeye, moving from St. Elizabeth down a little bit lower, the means of transportation during this, even though there was rail cars, it's mostly walking for folks, and so it would be a 30 to 45-minute walk from this Upper Buckeye neighborhood to St. Elizabeth. So they wanted something into their neighborhood, so it made sense to kind of move out as the Hungarians moved into the Upper Buckeye area. So they received permission from the diocese to purchase 9 lots, and then later the site of the old Newburgh City Hall. Newburgh City had been annexed in 1913. In 1919, the first mass was held at the chapel for the St. Mary Orphanage, and then 1922, their first wood church and a recreation hall were completed. Pastor Alexander Kohler was then called in 1927. He earned the nickname of the father of all Hungarian immigrants for his work with bringing people over and settled. Saw that a couple of times, but during his lengthy pastorate, the old church and rec hall and rectory all needed repairs. He shows up, it's all falling apart, and then the ceiling collapsed on the church. So we need a new church. So 1828, church hired architect Antonio DiNardo, who was an Italian immigrant. He attended the University of Pennsylvania and the Beaux-Arts Institute in Philadelphia. After working in Philadelphia, he moved to New York to work in the office of Al Brunner, who was part of the Cleveland Land Commission. It is noted in the Encyclopedia of Cleveland History that DiNardo, while working in that office, designed a building for the north end of our mall, which is possibly the earliest concept of what would become Terminal Tower. This is a picture of him and his wife. They came to Cleveland in 1921 and worked for the firm of Hubble Bennis before creating his own firm with William Cole. He would then strike out on his own. He did a lot of churches, residences, and also did the transportation building for the Great Lakes Exposition. His wife, Alita, was an interior decorator. And this is their passport photo from 1922. So this is what they looked like when they first moved to Cleveland. So it's a nice little find. That was an example of one of his works down in Barberton as well. The dedication of the church was October 26, 1930. The parochial school enrolled 500 students. Over the next 2 decades, the parish would grow, and in 1948, it reached its peak of 4,000 members. Although a new parish house was constructed in 1953, the trend of parishioners moving to the suburbs had already begun. Pastor Cole had retired in 1965, and the old rectory was raised for part of it. By 1973, membership was down to 1,700, with about 45% living in the suburbs. School enrollment also declined in the 1970s. By the late 1980s, membership was down to 329 families. Finally, in 1989, it became time to move. After the final mass on August 13th, the altar was dismantled, the stained glass removed, and the church sold to Second Cathedral Baptist Church. St. Margaret reestablished a new church on the grounds of the Divine Redeemer home in Orange Hills. In September 1993, the new St. Margaret of Hungary Church and Community Center was dedicated. However, their time here would be short-lived. St. Margaret of Hungary was one of the 29 parishes ordered to close by June 30th, 2010 by the Cleveland Diocese, and they closed in 2009. Let's jump ahead a little bit. Staff was approached about the designation of this building by Michelle Abernathy, who noted the congregation was celebrating 100 years. When I began my research, I found some discrepancies in the information that was given to me, and there's a saying that says, when the legend becomes truth, print the legend. And we kind of had that come up here, and it's been an interesting exercise working, finding this new information and trying to solve all our mysteries here. So early church records are silent to the origins of the congregation. So what we were able to do is piece together as best the information we can for the beginnings. Found that the earliest reference to the beginnings of the congregation are from the 24th anniversary. That was in the Holland Post. This is from the picture here is from the 25th anniversary. But there was organized in 1924, Reverend David Albert, and they were called the New Home Chorus, which caused some other interesting conflicts because there was also a New Home Baptist Church. So we're kind of wondering how we went from New Home to New Home. So the history that we have here is pieced together from the best possible information. So the New Hope Baptist Church appears first in the 1922 Cleveland City Directory. So we've got 2 years ahead of what was originally thought. So that actually puts it into 1921 to be listed in 22's directory. They're creating all the information. So we're possibly even 3 years earlier than thought. It kind of disappeared in 1924, and then it popped back in 1925 with Reverend Calvert, but it's at the same address as the original one as well. So that's where we have this parallel of saying, oh, it'd be one thing if it's at a different address that we originally thought now it's here, but it's at the same address. So that's where we're trying to work that all out. So then the following year, New Hope Baptist Church moved to 5705 Outhwaite Avenue, and Pastor Calvert was the link to the information here. And then another New Hope Baptist Church shows up at the old address. And they're both listed as New Hope Baptist Church. So then they moved to the current address here, or this address here, the 5705 Outhwaite, which is this church. This is their home for the next couple of years. Calvert's pastorate ended in 1927. Reverend Shaw was called for 6 months. And when we removed this picture from the frame, we saw his name at the bottom, so we can date the picture exactly to when he was here. So 5705 Outhwaite was built for the First Scandinavian Lutheran Church, and it dates 1907. They sold the building to the Nuash RA congregation in 1915, and this congregation must have either rented or shared the building with New Hope Baptist Church from late 1925 through 1929. The Nuash RA congregation sold the building to Bethel Missionary Baptist Church on December 5th, 1925, as the Jewish congregation was moving out to Warrensville Center. And I thought that was an interesting thing as well, because the Jewish congregation moving from this area straight out to Warrensville Center rather than going up into Glen, there's that migration pattern. So now we've got somebody jumping straight out there, and maybe it's something to look at the migration patterns of the Jews from this area up to Glenville and out. Were they already going out to Warrensville Center by the 1920s? So it was an interesting little pattern in the history of our migration patterns within Cleveland to see this. The same year, New Hope Baptist Church merged with Nariah Baptist Church. And the interesting about that, Reverend Lloyd Mitchell was the pastor of Nariah at the merger, but then left by 1932. And then Reverend Percy Harold began. During Herod's pastorate, the congregation moved to East 63rd Street to a converted barn. Reverend Jordan Allen became the stabilizing force for the congregation. And there's different accounts to when he started, but likely by 1937. And under his leadership, Second New Hope started banking money collected on the third Sunday of the month for a new church. In 1940, they were able to purchase a piece of property on Woodland Avenue with the intent to build new. However, plans changed when the property on East 79th Street came on the market in 1943. So we've seen this church before. This is also a nominated Cleveland landmark, which is going through our process as well. So it's kind of nice that this is, I just had the discussion with Councilman Starr about moving this along too. So it's going to be neat having these two moving together hand in hand and a connecting congregation. So they're moving to constructing a new Upper Buckeye neighborhood. Their asking price was $24,000. So the First Hungarian Reformed Church was moving to and constructing their new church in the Upper Buckeye neighborhood. The asking price was $24,000, or about $431,000 today. And on November 7th, the congregation marched from East 63rd Street to their new home. And 1 year later, the mortgage was burned. They were able to get the money from selling the property on Woodland to help pay for the new church. For nearly 50 years, this would be their home. Pastor Allen served the church until his passing in 1975. In 1976, Reverend George Quincy Brown was called to be pastor. Under his leadership, the church began broadcasting a weekly radio program called the Reformation Hour every Sunday. Members were involved in numerous neighborhood organizations, served on local, state, and national levels of Baptist organizations. And the congregation grew and a new home was needed once again. On September 24th, 1989, the congregation marched once again to a new home. And since that time, they have continued their community work in the Upper Buckeye neighborhood. Our historic structures are more than just bricks and mortar. It is about the people that give them life, create memories, and cultivate significance. This property's significance lies in its association to the broad patterns of Cleveland's history, from immigration to the movement of cultures throughout our neighborhoods. The building maintains its integrity with minor changes to the steeple roof and the removal of the stained glass windows. It does have that parochial feel because it is a school. And with the church extending into the back, school maintains its school look with a lot of original hardware still in place. The windows are all original except for the chapel windows here. And we are, I hit that button once. So it meets our criteria for designation. And like our members of the congregation out here, Janice will start us off with a little bit more information.
Welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Al will give you a little background. School came from the vision of our former pastor, Pastor George Quincy Brown. The school grades kindergarten through high school. And the school was accredited by the state, and our teachers were certified teachers. And the school was in existence for about 10 years. It was under at the beginning, we started with over 300 children, and as the years progressed, we increased to over 400 students. After Reverend Brown became ill and retired, we had a number of ministers standing in. We developed new membership of the church and the school board. So eventually, we decided that it was best to close the school. The school was in existence for 10 years. And we had a lot of programs from outside sources that came in to work with our children. And we had a lot of children from our neighborhood who were coming. And eventually we had children coming from other parts of the city. So as a result, we hired a bus that would pick up our children and bring them to the program. And we had an after-school program which was developed for children whose parents were working and they needed additional time to be at school rather than be back home. So we developed a program, school program. The educational program was a wonderful program when it was in existence, and we had a number of our children attended, our church members, their children also attended the school too. I had the pleasure of being on the committee to help outline and to work to develop the school. So I said it was worthy after government, wonderful vision, and I think it was a blessing to the community as a whole, to the families in the church. Okay, and we received our letter of article of incorporation on May 1st, 1994.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Pastor Les Williams Jr. I'm recently installed pastor. I've been there since August of last year. As you all can see, we have a very rich history. We're a church that is getting ready to celebrate 100 years. To God be the glory. And we feel that this is something that has been in the works, something that has been in prayers of many of our parishioners, for something for us to do because we want to maintain our history. And we also want to position ourselves to not only maintain our history, but to maintain our future. As you can see, we have a very large facility with 16 classrooms that we want to utilize to really help our community, to really be a place, a stable place where multiple organizations that we're making partners with can come and meet and gather, where young people in our neighborhood, which is a low-income neighborhood, can come and find a safe place where they can get educational resources. In fact, I work for the Cleveland Metropolitan School District. We just made a partnership with them to where we're going to offer some after-school programs for some of our kids who are struggling in our schools of what is it, K through high school. And so overall, we are the largest church in our neighborhood. We are the largest church that provides resources for our community as far as food, clothing, We've even did a heating shelter during the wintertime. But we just want to maintain, we want to celebrate our history, but we also want to maintain our legacy for future generations to come.
I do want to say I appreciate it and thank the new university. Hearing our vision and what we want to maintain in the history of our cities.
Excellent. Thank you so much for the presentation and for coming in person. You have a wonderful facility. And it's, the history is just, how you find all this, Carl? So thank you for the report of that also, such a rich history. I'm gonna open up the floor to the commission for questions and comments.
Yes, Madam Chair, I would like to speak on, second that whole church. First thing I want to say, my twin sister and I moved to Ward 4 in '89. Bought our home, our first home on Honeydale, which is to the south side of the church. So, and that's amazing how this is coming back around 100-fold. It's truly amazing. And so that was our first home, and we met several church members from the church, and I knew quite a few of the neighbors went to the church prior to them moving into the neighborhood. So it is a staple in the community. The church have served the community over the years that I'm still in the neighborhood. I stayed in the house at least about 4 or 5 years until I left the house to my twin sister, and I moved just up the street. And I bought a single family home. She remained in a 2-family home. Where 34 finished, because I have 2 sons, she had 1, and that's why we chose that particular house, that particular street, which was a staple, which is one of the, well, I would tell you, back in '89, you know, the whole community was absolutely beautiful, but over time, you know, you see what happened to it. So, but it's a blessing that I'm still in the neighborhood. It's a blessing that I'm still engaged in the neighborhood and also with the church members. I know what they have given to the community. Even myself, I go every second Saturday. They serve food to the community, and I go there and I help participate. I hang out with everyone and meet all the new members that come in. So you can say I spend my time with the church still today. You know, I remember Reverend Brown when he was the Reverend of the church during that time. And the church also had a house from the back of the parking lot. It was a house that was there on the mount. They bought that home and they turned it into a homeless center. And they cared for everyone who needed a place to stay. It wasn't about, I remember myself, it wasn't about each bed make money. You know, you buy a group home and it's for the cost of the bed. And I've been dealing with a lot of hearings with that. But I remember when Reverend Brown purchased that house, it was about whoever come in who needed a bed, who needed a place to stay. It didn't matter. So I remember that he housed everyone who needed a place to stay. And that was astounding that he did that and he was able to give back. So it was an open place for everyone in the neighborhood that needed that. So Reverend Brown, that I remembered him, and then I just met the new pastor, Lester, just last year, and we had a conversation. He still has that same vision. I mean, it's just phenomenal that even though I'm not at house on the Honeydale, and that house on the Honeydale is still there because my twin sister moved in Ward 5, but that house is still there. And we have great tenants. We have new owners that, that purchased their house, but it's just the history and the village and the connection that the Second New Hope Baptist Church brought into this community, and it still stands there with the same vision, the same caring, you know, the same expectations that they are giving back to the community. So I commend the elders who's still there. I was happy to meet our new pastor, Lester. I sat down and had a great conversation, and he is now willing to purchase another building that sits on the corner of 116 that I am trying to partner him with the owner who want to sell the new restaurant that's been empty for a while. So, you know, so we're working on that. So the expectation of preserving this church and bringing in new other programs in the community that's going to stand to have Ward 4. So I definitely support. I support this initiative nomination of attorney the Second New Hope Baptist Church to our background.
Excellent. Thank you, Councilman Gray. Dr. Williams, additional questions or comments?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to echo the sentiment of Councilwoman Gray. I believe I mentioned in an earlier meeting, I have some history in the neighborhood, not as a resident, but as someone who attended the original Harvey Rice School that was located at East 100 and Buckeye. It's a very busy intersection when I was a student there in the early 1970s. Mentioned also that it was a neighborhood in transition, as Councilman Gray also knows. But going from that little Budapest, predominantly Hungarian neighborhood to one that was increasingly African American, there were some tensions associated with the neighborhood change, but also lots of really good friendships that I made there as a student at Harvey Rice Elementary School. And of course, there was the Harvey Rice track garden and the Harvey Rice library and the bakery. It was just a wonderful community. I'm so pleased to see that people are still willing to invest in this part of Cleveland. I had a quick question now that I've made my comments, had a quick question for Mr. Brundage regarding your comment about the stained glass windows being removed. Just wondering if those windows were incorporated into another building, if you have knowledge of that, because I just thought to myself that it might be an interesting way for people from the old little Budapest neighborhood and now this very vibrant African-American Black Baptist faith community now to find some common ground architecturally, if that part of the history has somehow been preserved. Do we know where the windows are?
Through the chair, it is my understanding that those windows were incorporated into the new facility out in Orange Village. But since that has since been closed, it may have to be a conversation with the Catholic Diocese, which is not the most agreeable on putting stuff back or keeping stuff in buildings that have been deconsecrated or such. So it might be a challenge, but it could be something we could explore. But I would not put too much faith in getting that.
Okay, yeah, I was just wondered, I was just curious. And also, welcome to the new pastor. I believe I heard him say he's been there since 2023. And this is a comment about doing the kind of historical research that the staff has been engaged in. There's a wonderful pastor who's been part of Cleveland's history for a very long time in the Glenville community. His name is the Reverend Dr. Emmett Theophilus Cavanis. He said to me once in an oral history interview that as far as Black churches are concerned, we sometimes multiply by dividing. So I just thought it was interesting that there were two New Hope Baptist churches, you know, and perhaps that happened in the 1920s. I don't know, but I'm very pleased to see that there is this strong congregation dedicated to writing a new chapter in the history of Ward 4. And that building that was once home to a Catholic school in the Diocese of Cleveland now has all these amazing classrooms, and that you're willing, as a congregation pastor, to consider the adaptive reuse of that space and make it available for after-school programming and community meetings. So thank you again for your vision, and also to the congregation for your willingness to continue to invest in this neighborhood.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. Yes, please go ahead.
Dr. Williams mentioned Harvey Rice, and I just wanted to share with you guys that Harvey Rice and 2 other schools are our partner schools. And what happens as partner schools, we provide school supplies for the children at the beginning of the school year, and after Christmas break, when they return, we provide hubs, which we call hubs, which are hats, gloves, scarves, and underwear for the children to give to them when they come back from winter break. Share with them. And we have Harvey Rice, we have Sunbeam, we have Anton within those other schools that we support.
That is excellent. Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. Other questions or comments from the commission?
No, I'll note that, thank you, Carl, for the extensive research, and thank you to the pastor and members being here. I was tracking all the addresses as we were talking about them, on Google, and on Google Maps, you can see what's there now compared to what was there. And it's notable that many of the properties, the former locations have been demolished, and it's a symptom of larger issues that we see side, and so it's just amazing to see more and more churches leave landmarks so that we can preserve the history. So much of the history is history, so we need to make sure that it's documented and preserved in real time, not just photographs that used to exist. Living congregations now.
Thank you, Director Wong. Well, I would just, echo everything we said. Thank you for your commitment to this area, and thank you to commitment to this building, and really the future of this area also. So I'm in support of this nomination. I don't know if there's any other questions or comments from the commission, or if somebody would like to make I always say this incorrectly, a motion for recommendation.
It's a
motion
nomination.
for a nomination.
Would like to make the motion for the nomination, second Baptist Church to become a landmark. That's the right way to say it.
That's perfect. You better than I did. So we have a motion on the table. Do we have a second?
Madam Chair, I'd like to second that motion.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. And we have a motion. We have a second. Any further discussion? All right, Mr. Musson, please call roll.
All right, on the motion to nominate the Second New Hope Baptist Church as a Cleveland landmark, Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Dreyer,
Yes.
Mr. Dulick,
Yes.
Councilmember Gray,
Yes.
Director Wong,
Yes.
Mr. Lozier,
Yes.
Mr. Sandberry,
Yes.
Mr. Strickland,
Yes.
Mr. Trasick,
Yes.
Dr. Williams,
Yes.
and Ms. Trout.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes unanimously.
So congratulations, you're nominated, and Carl will continue to shepherd you through the process. Thank you.
Next up is council.
With a real fun weekend.
Legislation is drafted, ready, so.
Thank you again for coming.
Yeah.
So that concludes our landmark nominations for today. We do have meeting minutes that were circulated from January 25th, 2024. Are there any questions or comments on those meeting minutes, or would someone like to make a motion?
Make a motion to approve. To accept sleeping notes.
So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I will second.
Excellent. We have a motion. We have a second. Any further discussion? Mr. Musson, please follow.
And Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Dreyer,
Yes.
Mr. Dulick,
Yes.
Councilmember Gray,
Yes.
Director Wong,
Yes.
Mr. Lozier,
Yes.
Mr. Sambry,
Yes.
Mr. Strickland,
Yes.
Mr. Trasick,
Yes.
Dr. Williams,
Yes.
and Ms. Trapp.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes unanimously.
Right, then we are on to administrative reports.
I guess I just wanted to update everyone. I know at the last meeting I had mentioned that there had been a fire at the landmark at East 91st and Miles Park Avenue. After that meeting, landmark staff headed out and to check out the Pentecostal Church of God. There was not much left as far as, aside from the masonry structure. It's my understanding that by the end of that weekend, it was reduced to a pile of rubble after emergency demolition. Just the kind of freestanding masonry walls were considered too unsafe to leave, just standing on their own. So yeah, that leaves this district in a real precarious place. I think on the National Register listed district, there are only 2 buildings left, the library and then the church on the other side of town square. Our local district includes the Masonic Temple and then 3 houses that are left. So there's not much left there. It's such a unique and interesting plan. It's like a little piece of New England just sort of dropped in the middle of the east side. So yeah, I'll be working with the State Preservation Office to figure out next steps, if it needs to be just delisted from the National Register or, where to go from there, but I can keep you all posted. And then was it yesterday? It seems like it was like a week ago. We got word of another fire at 4434 Lorraine, or as you guys may know it, the Nun Coleman Funeral Home, which had been part of the proposed 45 West project. That project had actually just received final approval for site-specific zoning on Friday from the Planning Commission, based on the landmarks approved plans that incorporated the preservation of the structure. So, the building's in rough shape. The roof is collapsed. It looks like the whole second floor is collapsed as well. Still awaiting word as to whether the chief building official is going to issue a forthwith demolition order for this building, or if it will go through a more processed demolition, or if there's any way to save it. So it's only been a day, so we're still waiting to hear on that, unless maybe that decision has been made and I'm not aware. But in any case, this will certainly have impacts on the 45 West project, which you guys worked on for many, many months last year and ultimately approved. So we'll probably be seeing another version of that somewhere down the line here. And that's all I have.
Thank you for the reports. I don't believe there's anything else on our agenda today, so then we will adjourn today's meeting and see everyone in 2 weeks.
Yep.
In 2 weeks. All right, thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks, you too.
It's great to have a full commission. So many people in person. It's great.
Yes.